Okay, friends, so next question we have here with respect to the formation of atmospheric trimeridional circulation system. Describe with example its importance in making Earth a living planet. Guys, this is a very static question. Okay, this has been repeatedly asked in the previous time also, where we need to explain the trimeridional circulation. Under this trimeridional circulation, we need to look at two aspects. Number one, it has to be seen from the perspective of surface winds and the upper air winds. Now, here we need to see two aspects here. That is, at a point when the winds they are moving in a horizontal manner, that is within the same latitudes. So this type of wind movement, it is called as zonal circulation. While the winds which are moving towards the polar regions, from equator to polar regions, this type of wind movement, it is called as meridional circulation. Now here we'll be seeing that the winds, they are moving zonal also and they are moving meridional also. Okay, that is from different regions or different cells of the region here. So therefore we see here that we have a particular condition where we need to explain first the formation of atmospheric trimeridional circulation. So for this aspect, we need to take help of certain theorists here. So theorists, when we talk about, we have Farrell. So Farrell was one of the theorists who has explained the trimeridional circulation, taking up the previous examples of Headley. That is what is happening towards the region of equator and the movement of winds from equator to poles in three cell form. वहां रख दो, वहीं रख सकते हो, वहीं रख दो, ठीक है, thank you. Okay, so here we'll be seeing that the trimeridional circulation the Farrell has given that there is movement of wind which is being done from the equatorial region towards the polar region, and there is a three model of circulation here. But how this is taking place? Hadley has given his concept of thermal factor. Okay, and Farrell has given the concept of the mechanical factor for this movement of winds. Okay, now we need to understand this with a particular diagram here. So let's understand this with a diagram. Now what has happened, what is happening over the region? For example, this is a single cell here. Okay, this is part number one, where we are looking at this particular region from the front view. Okay, and we have another factor here where we are looking the things from the factor of the side view. Okay, So here we see that this is the front view and this is the lower atmosphere. And this one is the upper atmosphere. Okay, so under the lower atmosphere, what we are seeing that near the equatorial region, the winds they are rising here. Okay, the winds they are rising and they are reaching the region of tropopause where they are getting deflected towards the two different regions. Okay, that is towards the polarward in the northern hemisphere and also in the southern hemisphere. So here we'll be seeing, I'll just, okay, not an issue. So here we are seeing that there is development of first cell, that is Hadley cell, near 30 degrees of latitude. Okay, they are subsiding because they are getting pulled up. So this here will be seeing that it is the region of tropopause. This is the region of tropopause where the winds are rising because they are getting heated. Here they are getting heated. Okay, they are rising because here the low pressure system has formed. But here in the upper atmosphere, they are getting cooled. Because of their cooling, they start to subside. And with the subsiding near the 30-degree latitude, most of the winds they are getting subsided here, resulting into the formation of a high pressure system. Okay. So under this part, what we are seeing that there is movement of wind which is taking place from a high pressure region towards the low pressure region. Okay. Winds they will always move from high pressure region towards the low pressure region. But here we are seeing that in the towards the lower atmosphere, okay, the winds they are first moving in this way, but at the same point of time they are also affected by the Coriolis force. So because of the Coriolis force, they start to get deflected, because in the northern hemisphere the Coriolis force is clockwise and in the southern hemisphere the Coriolis force is anti-clockwise. So here we see that they become from meridional, they start to become zonal. Okay, here we can see that from meridional they start to become zonal, and in this way the deflection occurs, and near the 10 degrees or 5 degrees the wind starts, there is no deflection due to the Coriolis force. So here we see that the winds they are getting deflected from high pressure to low pressure system, but at the same point of time they are becoming deflected. Therefore in this region we see the development of the easterly winds. And here we see the complete pressure zone, that is the high pressure region. This is completely a high pressure zone here, from where the winds are moving from high to low pressure region. But at the same point of time, what we are seeing that near the polar regions, it is very cool. Near the polar regions, it is very cold. So here the, because of thermal cooling, the wind starts to subside and it results into the development of high pressure system. So because of this high pressure system, now what will happen? The winds, they will start to again move from high to low. Okay, but what we are seeing at the same time, the winds which are subsiding from this region, the winds which are subsiding at the 30 degrees of latitude, they move towards the 60-degree latitude. At the same point of time, the winds from 90 degrees, they move towards the 60-degree latitude, and here these two winds they collide with each other. Okay, these two winds they collide with each other and they are mechanically rising, This is resulting into the movement of winds again, and at the near the tropopause they are going back to their uh, basic regions. So because here there is development of a system, Okay, here we see that there is development of a vertical rising. Okay, here we can see that there is convergence of wind. Because of the convergence of wind, there is formation of a low pressure system here. Okay, there is formation of a low pressure system. Because of this low pressure system, this is mechanically formed. Okay, here we can say that this is mechanically formed here. So because of this, what we see that the moment of wind, it is getting again changed. So when I go again from 30° to 60° latitude, here I again see that the winds, they will start to move from high to low. So here the wind starts to move from high to low again, but they are also deflected by the Coriolis force, which is clockwise in the northern hemisphere. Therefore, the winds, they change their nature and they move in the clockwise direction, because of which they become westerly in their component. Okay, they become westerly in nature. While we see that in the polar region, the winds become easterly in their composition and nature, which we also call as polar easterlies. They become polar easterlies because of the Coriolis force deflection. Now, what we are seeing here, this is the part of the wind system which is seen in the lower atmosphere. But when we go to the upper atmosphere, what we see here, for example, this is equator, this is 30°, this is 60°, and this is 90°. Okay, towards the southern hemisphere, this is again 30°, 60°, and this is 90°. So here what we see that we have a region near the equator. Here we have a region near the equatorial region where we see a kind of a wind system from 30 to 30 here. Okay, from 30 to 30, where we see the development of the easterly winds. Okay, here we have the presence of the easterlies. But what we see here that towards the 30 to 60° latitude, towards 30 to 60° latitude, we have the presence of westerly winds. Okay, here we have. So here we can also see that as the winds, they reaches the tropopause, as the winds, they reaches the tropopause, as the wind, they reaches the tropopause, here the extent of easterlies, it declines here. Okay, and there is prevalence mainly of the westerlies from the lower atmosphere up to the upper atmosphere. And what we see here that near the polar regions, near the polar regions, it is only after the subsidence of winds, it is only after the subsidence of winds that there is the easterly component, that is the Coriolis force component, it is getting applied here because of the pressure situation, and the winds, they become again here easterlies. The winds again become here easterlies. But in the upper air atmosphere, the upper air atmosphere, there is presence of westerly wind here. Okay, so what we see here that, what we see here that in the upper air atmosphere of the polar regions, there is again the presence of the westerly component. So between these zones, this particular zone here will be saying that there is a transitional zone. There is a transitional zone in all the regions where we see that the component of the Coriolis force is applied and the direction of the wind, it is changing from meridional to zonal. Okay, it is changing from meridional to zonal. For example, here we'll be seeing that it is zonal to it is meridional to zonal. Here also we'll be seeing that after nearly after subsiding, they becomes meridional to zonal here. Okay, then they start moving in the same latitudinal or same cell region here. Okay, now looking at the question part again. Okay, so here we see that because of the development of the pressure system, the Coriolis component, the thermal factor, and the mechanical factor, we are able to explain the formation of the atmospheric tricellular circulation system. Now we have to describe with these examples its importance in making the Earth a living planet. So how the Earth is becoming a living planet because of these particular conditions here. Now, looking at the part here, what this trimeridional circulation is doing, it is resulting into the formation of a pressure system. Because of which there is circulation of wind is taking place at different latitudinal. Near the polar regions, the winds they get cooler up, they get cooled up here. So here we see that there is presence of a tropopause. These are trade winds. These are anti-trade winds. Okay. Here we see that there is development of low pressure. Here is development of high pressure, then low pressure, then high pressure region here. Okay. Here we see that the winds from the equatorial region, it is reaching up to the region of the polar region. So there is a circulation of wind from equator to polar region. Okay, there is development or there is movement of wind or circulation of wind from equator to polar region, because of which the heat is exchanged. The heat is exchanged here from this is the heat surplus region and this is the heat deficit region. This is heat surplus and heat deficit region. So in this way, we see that there is a circulation of the system is taking place and heat is transferred from the surplus region to the deficit region, and the coolness is transferred or the cooler winds is transferred from the heat deficit region to the heat surplus region. In this way, we are able to understand that how the temperature of the earth is maintained and how the heat, because of this phenomena, will be seeing that there is balance of heat. Heat is being done over the earth, and this is making the earth a living planet. So in this way, through this diagram, okay, we are able to explain that how the heat exchange between the two extreme region is taking place, and it is resulting into the it is resulting into the development of a balanced heat development region where the Earth is becoming a living planet. Okay, so in this way, we can explain this answer. Okay, through these diagrams. These diagrams are very important. We need to show both the atmospheric system, that is the lower atmosphere, how the winds are moving there, and the upper atmosphere, how the winds are moving there, the westerly component and the easterly component, okay, in the upper atmosphere and the lower atmosphere. For example, this is easterly, this is easterly, this is westerly, and this is again easterly. But here we can understand it from the lower atmosphere to upper atmosphere, how the easterly and westerly component is actually working here. Okay. Then we need to also explain the trimeridional circulation, that how it is taking place. That is meridional circulation and zonal circulation and the pressure systems of the Earth. So in this way, we are able to explain this complete question and we are able to explain the answer. Going to the next question. Here the question is, what is the UN decade on ecosystem restoration? How does it balance ecological goals with emerging socio-economic needs like food security and development? Like food security and development. So this is one of the questions which we need to answer here from the perspective of the sustainable development, the balancing of the sustainable development, why the economic development and the uh, environmental conservation. So looking at this answer here, we can very simply identify the areas which where we need to actually work. So this UN decade on ecosystem restoration, I am writing it as UNDER. Okay, I am referring it to as UNDER. So UNDER will be saying that it has been initiated by United Nations Environmental Program plus Food and Agricultural Organization, which is also part of United Nations. Okay, so what they have seen that we already have the development of 17 sustainable development goals, but the timeline of this sustainable development goal, this was questionable. Okay, this became questionable because these goals were given around in 2015. Basically, we'll be seeing that this is a part of environmentalism. It's a part of environmentalism where this came into the picture. The sustainable development goal came into the picture in 2015, but how it can be achieved, how they can be promoted. So therefore, UNEP and Food and Agricultural Organization, they came together and they have provided one unique idea, that is we will take 2021 to 2030, one complete decade as a decade for a UN decade on ecosystem restoration, where they will be working on aspects to restore the degraded ecosystems of world. Okay, so this was one of the important aspect was taken into picture. But how this can be done? Okay, how this can be taken up into the picture? Here we need to look at the aspect of sustainable development goal, where we have the picture here. Okay, So here we have three goals or three areas, three important areas. One is economic or economy, second is social, and third is environment. So the areas which are interfering with economy, social, and the environmental aspect, this is becoming the part of the sustainable development. This is becoming an important aspect of sustainable development. Here, what actually we are saying here that since the industrial revolution, the human beings have started to look at the world from the eyes of capital. So whatever we see, whatever the materials we see from the component of environment, we look at from the view of commodity. So these commodities, they can be converted into capital, and the way we can accumulate the commodity, the more capital and wealth it can be created. Yes, capital is required, the commodity is required majorly for economic development. But this commodification and this economic development, it is having certain costs. What cost it is bearing here? It is bearing the cost of environmental degradation. Currently, we are saying that in certain cities of India, like New Delhi, during the winter season, the AQI level it is reaching 500, 450 to 500. The Yamuna River, which is flowing by the region of Delhi, it is highly polluted. Actually, it is declared as a dead river. There is no biological activities taking place in the river. The water which is present in the tap water supply, it is not actually meeting the standard for the potable water. Okay. Apart from this, we'll be looking at the various other issues with respect to the deforestation, the place that is provided, which is present for the citizens or the people to live. There are certain administrative issues. There are certain issues with respect to the criminality. Okay. So what we are seeing here that because of the base or the human beings which we are expanding in the contemporary time, it is making the world unlivable more. It is making the world unlivable more, where because of environmental degradation, it has been taking up more in the part of the economic development. So what we see here that we need to have a system where we can equate this economic development and the or we can create a balance between the economic development and the environmental degradation. We need to create a balance. Now, how this balance can be created? There were certain views with respect to that part. So when I take it from the economic development perspective, I have a perception of anthropocentric approach, which we also call it as the shallow ecology. In the second aspect, we have the environmental development here. So, sorry, the environmental perspective here. So, when I look at from this perspective, which is called as the ecocentric approach, which is called as deep ecology. In both these conditions, what we are actually looking at, we are looking at an approach by which the world in the next part, or our policies, the next phase will be developed here. Okay. In the ecocentric development, we see here that the nature, it is kept at the center. The nature or environment is kept at the center, and the development, it is kept at the periphery. Okay. And nature and environment is, it is kept at, in the certain other part here we'll be seeing that the nature it is kept at periphery, and the economic development it is kept at center. So this is actually resulting into a condition where the environmental degradation it is increasing, and we'll see that the economic development it is increasing at the cost of the environmental degradation. But when we look at this perspective, all these things, what we see here that the issue majorly lies with the approach because of which the humans, they are only getting affected. But the which part of human it is actually important here. So when we look at this aspect here, we see it from the socio-economic aspect. When we look at from the socio-economic aspect, what we see here that number one, the major issue or the major part, the major people who are suffering because of this approach. So it has resulted into the climate change. Okay. So the consequences of climate change or the heat of climate change, it is majorly bared by the poor people or the poor section of society. Okay. While the rich, they have resources, they are able to create a system for them through which they can overcome, or they do not feel the burn of this climate change. So therefore, what we see here that there is an issue of capitalism again, that with the control of resources, you are able to overcome the issues. But the poor section who are basically feeling the burn, they are classified by Marx. Okay, they are classified by Marx as the people who are suffering. Similarly, with respect to the resources like air, water, okay, here we see that the poor section, they are getting polluted air or polluted water, but the rich, they are getting purified air and purified water. This is same with the concept of food. Okay. Under food also we'll be seeing that the poor, they are getting more bioaccumulated food, while the rich, they are getting more organic food. Okay. The rich, they are getting organic food here. So what we see here that there is a Marxian aspect which can be applied over this particular area, and we can see the socio-economic issues which are actually rising with respect to the rich and poor, or I can also call it as capitalist which are able to overcome the various issues of the issues with respect to the socio-economic consequence. Let's move back to the question again. and let's look at from the emerging socioeconomic needs like food and development, food security and development. Now, we have seen it from the perspective of these approaches where we are looking at the issues are coming with respect to the security aspect with respect to food also. In the second part, when I look at from the food security, I can also see here that it is basically given by Malthus that the population, it will grow geometrically and the resources, it will grow arithmetically. In this way, what we see that with the rising of the resources, with the rising of resources, there will be sharp increase on the population of human beings. But after a point, we'll be seeing that there will be certain issues with the society, and this will result into the check mechanism. This will result into the various check mechanisms here. So because of this, it will be able to control the population of human beings, but it will be in the form of famines, wars, and other issues, civil wars, etc. But the next aspect which was taken up here, which was basically left here, that was the technology. Under the part of technology, we have seen that there is technocentric approach, which is more of a possibilistic view. But there is another approach, which is, we can see here, which is cornucopian. Okay, cornucopian, what it is saying that we need to have certain resource development, but we need to keep the environment at the center of conservation. Okay, so it was more deterministic in its view. But yes, it is not saying that we don't need to do any kind of development here. Later on, we see that there was also another view, that is Jnainism. Under Jnainism, we see that there was more preference towards the traditional knowledge. Traditional knowledge, and it has to be used for the security of the food. So what we see in the contemporary time, there is an issue with respect to the food security, which is happening because of, number one, climate change. Because we are going for the more use of fossil fuel. Fossil fuel resulting into global warming. Because of global warming, there is increase in the, we can say, the climate change. So this climate change, it is making our climate extreme in the form of extreme rainfall and extreme drought condition. Okay. Secondly, we'll be also seeing that this climate change or the rise in temperature, it is impacting our nutrient in the food. It is said that with the rise in the temperature, the protein intake by the crops, it declines. Okay, it declines. This report has been given by Food and Agricultural Organization. Okay, so this has been said by the Food and Agricultural Organization along with the UNEP, that with the rising temperature, the protein declines and the other macronutrients and micronutrients. The macronutrients and micronutrients, they also decline with the rising temperature, and this is actually impacting the nutrient security. Which is basically resulting into a condition called as hidden hunger. This is resulting into the condition of hidden hunger. Plus, we see that because of the temperature rise, there is heat waves. Okay. The instances of heat waves, they are increasing. So here we see that if we take the instance from last 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, the instances of heat waves, they have almost tripled. So because of this, various crops which are of winter season, they are seeing the face of the heat waves, and this is resulting into the decline of productivity. So this is resulting into decline of productivity. Thus what we see here, that because of this issue, this is resulting into the condition of food security. It is basically affecting the food security. This we can see in all the tropical countries. This condition is seen in all the tropical countries, plus some countries of the temperate regions. So what we see here, that these conditions, they are actually impacting the food security of the world, not only a particular country, but of the world here. So therefore, what we see, that we need to come to a particular agreement with ourselves, like how we need to move further. Like we need to have a sustainable development, we need to have a catastrophic condition, or we need to have any other condition. Okay? So this we can take up here in the part of the conclusion, or in the part of the way forward, where we are looking at the principles of the carrying capacity, that is the Neo-Malthusian approach. Then in terms of possibilistic, we can have climate smart agriculture. Okay, climate smart agriculture, where basically we are modifying the seeds. Where actually we are modifying the seeds. Then we can also have a approach which can be more towards the Gyanism, where we are using the traditional knowledge. Where we are using the traditional knowledge for the achievement of food security, plus the socio-economic equality. Okay. Plus, we need to also see at certain aspects from the perspective of Marx plus Marxian plus welfareism. Under the Marxian, we need to look at the structures which are economic, social, political, and from the welfareism, we need to look at the government policies which are with respect to the food security, plus policy for farmers, that is we can say the organic farming. Okay, apart from this, we can also look at, for the food security, we can go it for the poor part. Okay, for the organic fertilizers availability, it has to be made more available to the farmers so that they leave behind the chemical fertilizers. Okay, the next aspect, we also need to see the minimum support price. Okay. For example, rice, wheat, millet. So rice and wheat, they are basically the crops which are being more affected because of climate change and heat wave. But millet is one of the crop which is least affected because of the climate change. So therefore, we need to have a support price policy here, which will be the part of welfareism, and it will promote the food security and the socio-economic equality in the region. And it will also help us to gain a better social sustainable development, which have a economic and environmental balance. So therefore, we see that we need to have a balanced approach. We need to have a balanced approach where the economy and environmental conservation basically, the environmental conservation, they are taken on hand, so that the uh, equity plus sustainability with respect to development is achieved to avert the catastrophic situation as propounded by Malthus and Neo Malthus. For the Neo Malthus, basically we can use here uh, the non-communist manifesto. Basically, that was the part here. So they have given one idea, that was the non-communist part here, that was against the Marxian philosophy. So that was the Neo-Malthusian approach can be applied here, because both of them have provided that how the non-availability of food at one particular point of time will result into the socio-economic disparity, and it will also result into the catastrophic situations where the large scale of death will be seen over the world region. So this is the answer for this question. Let's move to the next question.